You did the responsible thing. You saved 3 to 6 months of expenses because that is what the old emergency fund rule says. But if that number still feels shaky, the problem may not be your lack of discipline. For many people, that one-size-fits-all rule is a blunt tool for a world where expenses and income rarely stay flat. Income can be steady for some and bumpy for others, creating a baseline where costs move around much more than we expect. One surprise expense is stressful, but when 2 or 3 hit at once, they can easily knock over a plan that looked solid on paper. The old rule gives you a generic month count, but it doesn't start with the specific details of your life. A lot of people built the right habit around the wrong number, and that means you can do everything right and still feel one bad month away from trouble. When Alex built his first emergency fund, he did it exactly by the book. 3 months of expenses and a savings account. He felt secure. Then his car needed a major repair, his rent went up, and an unexpected medical bill arrived in the mail. That 3-month cushion lasted about 5 weeks. This happens because most people choose a target backward. They start with a number they heard online and then try to force their life into it. They rely on a clean, planned budget that rarely matches the messy reality of what they actually spend. That planned budget often misses the small things like city parking, random delivery fees, an extra grocery run, a forgotten birthday gift, or an uncanceled subscription. These tiny purchases still leave your account. This chart shows how those untracked costs pile up. Your actual monthly baseline is almost always higher than the clean number you carry around in your head. When a savings target is built on an estimate instead of reality, even a decent balance can disappear faster than expected. To fix this, you have to stop asking if you have the internet number and start measuring what your life actually costs you right now. Pull up your bank and credit card statements from the last 90 days and look at every single transaction. Add up every dollar that actually left your accounts. This isn't about your best month or your perfect budget. It's about everything that was actually spent. Take that total for the last 90 days and divide it by 3. That number is your honest monthly baseline. It accounts for the version of you that forgets things and the months where everything seems to go wrong. Using your empirical spending behavior allows you to build a safety net that accounts for how you actually live. Once you see that number, the whole conversation changes. If your savings ran out too fast in the past, it wasn't a failure of your character, it was a failure of the target. You can stop trying to hit an arbitrary milestone and focus on the actual goal. Real resilience is measured by whether your fund can actually protect your household when life gets messy. Financial experts almost universally recommend one specific baseline: save 3 to 6 months of living expenses. This rule creates a bridge to pay bills and keep the lights on if your paycheck stops, buying you time to find a new role. However, this timeline relies on a predictable, static model of living costs that rarely aligns with actual human experience. Look at this diagram comparing a fixed rule against real-world spending habits. Because the rule is broad, applying it to these fluctuating personal costs means a 6-month fund feels small for one family, while a 3-month fund feels like overkill for another. Relying on a generic time horizon creates a false sense of security. It leaves households exposed to the actual mechanics of how modern financial emergencies happen. Take a look at your monthly budget. We tend to view our baseline living costs as fixed, but active expenses are constantly shifting underneath us. A gap in childcare coverage, an appliance failure, a surprise dental bill, or a sudden dip in shifts can all hit your wallet while you are still working. A modern reserve serves as a shock absorber for the costs of active everyday life. This chart shows how that shock absorber works. When the expenses bar suddenly spikes above the cash flow bar, it creates an empty space. That space is the mathematical gap between what life costs in a rough stretch and what your current paycheck can handle. Sizing the functional cushion requires measuring the size of that specific cash flow gap first, rather than just tallying up total monthly bills. The second major factor is exactly how your paycheck arrives in your bank account. Someone with a salaried position, strong corporate health benefits, and a partner bringing in a second steady income has a highly predictable stream of cash. This graph illustrates the difference between that stable household and a variable income profile. The flat line is a steady salary. The jagged line represents someone who works freelance, relies on sales commissions, or operates as the sole provider for multiple dependents. Notice those deep valleys on the volatile line. Surviving those extended dry spells requires a significantly larger pool of reserve capital than someone riding the flat, predictable salary line. The way you earn your money dictates your direct exposure to risk. A generic month count cannot protect a highly volatile income. There is a third variable that almost everyone ignores: what happens after the emergency is over. If you pull money out of your reserve, you have to replace it. Recovery speed is the amount of time it takes to rebuild that account before another crisis forces you to take on high-interest credit card debt. Here's a diagram showing two post-crisis trajectories. The steep line shows a household that can rapidly replace withdrawn funds. The shallow line shows a scenario where rebuilding is a slow, multi-year grind. A standard 3 to 6 month target ignores this disparity. It treats the quick bounce back and the long, slow climb as identical risks. If your recovery speed is slow, you need a vastly larger initial fund to keep yourself out of a downward debt spiral during that vulnerable rebuild phase. The 3 to 6 month rule offers a helpful starting point, though it lacks the precision needed for a truly resilient plan. It provides a generic range while ignoring your actual costs, your specific income stability, or your ability to recover. Look at what happens when we combine these metrics. The unexpected cost gap, the volatile income trend line, and the post-crisis recovery speed merge into a single cohesive map of your unique financial risk. To actually protect you, a modern emergency fund must be personal first and generic second. Faster, more urgent tone. Many emergency funds fail for reasons that have nothing to do with the actual cash balance. Sizing your cushion correctly means nothing if you commit the operational errors that destroy the money before you ever need to use it. Many people look at their bank accounts and feel a deep, nagging anxiety that their emergency fund is too small. Usually, the issue isn't the math. The real problem is that the underlying logic driving how you use that safety net is broken. Before you can build a reliable saving system, you have to stop the specific behaviors that are actively tearing your current one down. Dismantling these 5 logical errors is the mandatory first step to achieving financial security. The first trap is adopting arbitrary target numbers from generic online advice as your own personal financial benchmark. The internet loves clean, repeatable numbers, but your job stability, household size, and monthly bills are entirely unique to you. Generic advice is structurally unsound for your specific life. If you measure yourself against a standard built for a stranger, you will either feel behind for no reason or feel safe for the wrong reasons. The second major mistake is delaying your savings plan until a theoretically perfect month arrives. Many people wait for work to settle down or for expenses to naturally calm down. That perfect, quiet month is an illusion that never actually arrives. Holding out to save a massive lump sum all at once leaves you completely exposed to daily risks in the meantime. Letting external benchmarks and unrealistic timelines dictate when you save ensures you remain perpetually vulnerable. The third error is a paradox: putting emergency expenses on a credit card specifically to avoid touching your savings balance. This graph shows the result. Untouched savings earn almost nothing, while credit card debt grows aggressively through compounding interest. Refusing to deploy the cash you saved transforms a single bad week into months of prolonged financial stress and interest payments. This leads to the fourth mistake: forcing a single account to absorb every foreseeable financial problem you encounter. A true, unpredictable emergency is distinct from holiday shopping, annual insurance, or routine pet care. These are predictable costs that belong in separate, planned savings channels. Mixing routine, plannable expenses into your emergency fund masks whether you are actually prepared for a genuine crisis. Misallocating these funds or refusing to use them when a crisis hits turns your safety net into a source of hidden financial drag. The final fallacy is the belief that a massive account balance will eventually fix a broken monthly cash flow. Being consistently short on money usually stems from an unrealistic spending plan or an unpredictable income stream. In this scenario, an emergency fund is a temporary patch. It cannot fix the reality of recurring costs that slip through unnoticed. Relying on a safety net as a substitute for a functional daily money system ensures the fund will eventually be drained to zero. Achieving security requires moving away from the obsession with a static account balance. Instead of only looking at the total, you must ask if that money is being deployed for its intended job. You also need to evaluate if your surrounding money system supports the fund. This chart shows how monthly cash flow, planned savings, and the emergency fund should interconnect to support each other without leaks. Removing these 5 roadblocks eliminates the friction that usually prevents people from ever completing their fund. Next, we will move into the practical application, where financial security functions as a working mechanism integrated into your daily life. We've all heard the traditional rule of personal finance: save 3 to 6 months of expenses. But when a real emergency hits, that generic wishful number usually collapses under the weight of actual life. Step 1 of a modern emergency fund is throwing out the theoretical budget. You need your real baseline. Pull your exact spending from the last 90 days. That is your foundation. Looking at this diagram, we can split those 90 days into 2 layers. The bottom area chart represents your core essentials: housing, food, utilities, and insurance. The top area chart stacks on the messy extras, the unpredictable but completely normal expenses that still happen in real life. When those 2 layers combine, they form your true baseline. It gives you a clear, unvarnished picture of what a rough month actually costs, without any optimistic guesswork. Once you have that baseline, move to step 2. Stop looking for one magic number to hit, and set a target range instead. This bar chart compares 2 different financial realities. On the left, if your income is steady and your household is simple, you might start with 3 to 4 months of real spending. But look at the fluctuating bar on the right. If your income swings, if other people rely on you, or if rebuilding savings would be slow, you push that cushion limit higher. That gap is your personal risk zone. You use those ranges as starting points, not rigid laws. The goal is to calculate a range that fits your specific life, not a massive number that sounds impressive to someone else. Rooting your fund in a personalized baseline and a flexible range protects you. It keeps you from undersaving, and it stops the unnecessary anxiety of chasing an impossible target. Step 3 is physical isolation. Open a savings account that is exclusively for emergencies. A lot of people prefer an account that earns some interest and avoids monthly fees. This diagram shows exactly why the bank you choose matters less than the separation itself. If your emergency money sits right next to your everyday spending node, the lines blur. It becomes far too easy to dip into that savings silo for a non-emergency. Step 4 is about putting the habit on autopilot. Set up an automatic transfer to that isolated account every single payday. This flowchart tracks how the system works. Notice how the recurring deposit completely bypasses the user decision node. It doesn't matter if the transfer starts at $25 or $50. The consistency is what matters, because the fund steadily grows without requiring a fresh decision from you every week. By mandating that physical separation and automating the transfers, you entirely remove human willpower and decision fatigue from your saving process. Step 5 tackles the start. Do not get stuck staring at a massive final target range before you even begin transferring cash. Your immediate goal is much smaller. Build a first layer of breathing room, just enough to absorb the impact of one annoying surprise without panic. For some people, that first layer might be a few $100s. For others, it needs to be higher. The exact dollar amount varies, but the strict purpose is the same: to give yourself immediate slack. Breaking a massive financial target into sequential layers shifts your psychology. You stop worrying about overwhelming debt avoidance and start stacking immediate, actionable security. Step 6 is making a refill rule, and you have to do this long before you actually need it. Decide in advance what happens after you inevitably use the fund. Here is a closed-loop system showing how a refill works. When the savings silo drops, it triggers a response. Maybe your automatic transfer simply keeps running. Or, as the secondary redirection arrow shows here, you temporarily pause discretionary spending and route that cash flow straight back to restore the silo. When the system stabilizes and returns to baseline, the redirection shuts off. Having this pre-planned rule matters because it takes the emotion out of a setback. A stressful financial hit just becomes a predictable, routine process. Finally, step 7. Put a reminder on your phone to review the fund on a strict 3-month schedule. During that review, check your recent spending, look at your income pattern, and note any major life changes. If your costs rose, adjust the target up. If your situation got more stable, you may not need as much cash locked away. A quick review keeps the fund aligned with real life, instead of frozen in the past. This is the modern playbook. Know your real baseline. Choose a range that fits your risk. Keep the money separate. Automate the transfers. Build in layers. Refill it when used, and review it regularly. It is a much stronger system than repeating a generic, outdated rule and hoping it works. If this playbook gave you a clearer way to size your emergency fund, hit like so more people can find it. If you know someone who is still using the old 3 to 6 month rule without checking their real numbers, send this to them. In the comments, type emergency fund target and the number you are aiming for. I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, so subscribe and I will see you in the next one. Abandoning wishful, generic rules in favor of a dynamic, reality-based system takes a little bit of upfront work, but it is the only reliable path to modern financial resilience.